Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be diving in.
So we've got this fascinating set of source materials today, really taking us deep into the machinery of ancient states, both Rome and Greece.
Yeah, it's less about the grand ideals they talked about and more about the cold, hard pragmatism they used to keep control. We're really unpacking how governance worked on the ground.
And the mission here, the common thread we're seeing, is just this absolute subordination of the individual. Your life, your actions, everything. It comes second to the state.
To its discipline, its survival. And this was maintained through, intricate systems of law, but also just raw force. They demanded everything.
And that demand, it starts with this really fundamental Roman concept, imperium, doesn't it? The authority to rule.
Exactly. We often link imperium straight to generals and military command, and that's fair.
Yeah.
But the sheer scope of this power, even when it wasn't about war, it was just immense. It defined so much.
It really is the starting point for state control, isn't it? And if we look at the most extreme form of that power, the Roman dictatorship, the sources are pretty clear. The dictator's core job, their essential competence, was imperium militia.
Absolute military command.
Yeah.
For defense, for conquest. But here's what's really telling, I think.
You know what?
It's what that power didn't cover. This dictator, holding the republic's fate, they never dealt with the civil law, never acted as a judge in, say, private disputes. That wasn't their remit.
So the ultimate emergency power is almost exclusively military. If that's the source of absolute state authority, what does that immediately tell you about Roman priorities?
It tells you that the state's survival was primarily seen as an external challenge. The biggest tool, the absolute command, was for war-making, internal order. That was handled by the regular laws, the courts.
But imperium itself, that right to command life and death almost, was tied directly to military necessity.
Which emphasizes its absolute primacy in their thinking. That separation, it shows the structure, the logic. Extreme power is only okay when facing extreme threats, usually from outside.
And you can see this kind of baked-in absolutism mirrored elsewhere, right? Down to the family level.
Oh, absolutely. The state's power structure had a parallel right in the household.
You're talking about the paterfamilias.
Indeed, the master of the household. Roman social code gave him the notorious ius vitae et nissis.
The right of life and death.
Over everyone, legally, under his power. His children, even adult children, his slaves. It's quite something.
It's shocking to us now, isn't it, that ultimate power wasn't just for the state dealing with treason, but held by a father in his own home.
Exactly. Now, okay, custom and social pressure definitely softened this over time. It wasn't arbitrary murder. But the fact that it existed legally, it shows this fundamental baseline of absolutism in the Roman mind.
Authority, whether it's the state's or the father's, could ultimately encompass life itself.
So when the state acted with absolute power, it was drawing on something deeply rooted, almost ancestral, in their social structure. Okay, so if Rome's legal bedrock has this absolute command idea, let's shift gears. Let's look at the Greek world and what happens when that kind of military discipline hits a wall. A tactical disaster.
You mean Pylos, Bacteria?
Exactly.
Yeah.
During the Peloponnesian War. The infamous Spartan defeat on that island.
Yeah, this is huge because it's the Spartans, the legends of discipline, the hoplites everyone feared. And they weren't beaten by, say, superior courage. They were beaten by tactics, by terrain.
It's an incredible window into how rigid discipline can just break down under specific pressures. The sources give us a brutal picture.
How so?
Well, first, the terrain was all wrong for them. Heavy armor, difficult ground. The sources say they were encumbered by their arms. They couldn't move effectively.
Meanwhile, the Athenians had light troops.
Right, light armed skirmishers, Siloi,
Right.
running circles around them, basically, keeping their distance, just showering the Spartans with missiles.
Almost like guerrilla tactics against heavy infantry. But it wasn't just the physical damage, was it? It was the psychological side.
That's key. The sources talk about total chaos. Constant clouds of dust, apparently from burnt woods nearby.
So they couldn't see.
Couldn't see properly, choking on the dust, and then this unending rain of arrows and stones. They couldn't see the enemy clearly, couldn't engage them properly.
And crucially,
They couldn't hear the word of command. That's what the sources emphasize. The noise, the dust, the confusion, it drowned out the very thing that held them together. Their command structure.
without orders, these super disciplined soldiers are suddenly just individuals, blindly fighting.
Utterly distraught, the sources say. At their wits' end, facing annihilation. It's a powerful image.
Yet even then, their training kicked in, didn't it?
It did. Even in that nightmare, The source material points out their endurance, their discipline was still conspicuously displayed. It became this slow, painful retreat.
A controlled withdrawal, even under that pressure.
Exactly. They had to cover about a mile of really rough ground. Hot sun, thirsty, exhausted, trying to reach this high hill with an old wall for defense.
An old cyclopean wall, right. They refused to just break and run, even when maybe individuals could have escaped.
That's the core of it. The conditioning held. They got to the wall, set up a defense, fought off the first attacks. The final surrender, it wasn't a moral collapse.
It was tactical.
Purely tactical impossibility. Some Messenians found this crazy, almost impassable path up the cliffs. Suddenly, light troops are above the Spartans, attacking from the rear.
Nowhere to go. Checkmate.
Checkmate. Continued resistance meant pointless death. So the lesson is, Spartan failure wasn't about lack of courage. It was logistical, tactical. But it shows the immense pressure. Endures everything until defeat is absolute, undeniable.
Which makes for a really interesting contrast when you look at Athens, right? A society that definitely valued citizenship, military service, but seemed to have real problems with actually getting people to show up.
A very sharp contrast. The Spartan ideal versus the practicalities of Athenian conscription.
I mean, Athenian hoplites had good reasons to maybe hesitate. The risks were real. You look at battles like Spartolus, Delium, Chaeronea, these weren't minor skirmishes. Whole forces could be wiped out.
Annihilation was a genuine possibility. So that noble ideal of sacrifice, it runs smack into the basic instinct of self-preservation. And in Athens, unlike Sparta, there were ways out.
Okay, the rich and powerful, sure, they could always pull strings. But you're saying average guys could dodge the draft too.
The sources suggest they could. Even average conscripts under the Catalogos system, the conscription list.
How? If service was so central to being a citizen, how did the state let that happen? Wasn't there a punishment?
Well, theoretically, yes. But practically, maybe the system was just overwhelmed sometimes. Or maybe bureaucratic loopholes. The sources say people would fabricate grounds for exemption.
Like faking an illness?
Claiming illness, injury, some religious obligation. Or even simpler, just not appearing at muster when their name was called from the Catalogos.
Wow. So even in this highly civic democracy, there's this constant struggle for compliance.
It really suggests that collective strength always needs active enforcement. And if the military system had these weaknesses, it put even more pressure on the legal systems to be absolutely rigid in other areas, to compensate.
That's a perfect transition, actually. If military duty could be a bit inconsistent, let's say, then the law had to step up. Let's look at how Athenians mixed private feelings and public order, especially around serious crimes like homicide and maintaining political stability.
Yeah, when you look at the real foundations of their justice system, like Draco's laws, which Demosthenes quotes much later, you see this brutal clarity. The state was willing to basically deputize citizens to enforce its judgments.
Deputize them how? What was the mechanism?
Well, Draco's law explicitly allowed citizens to outright kill or arrest, using a process called apagoge, any exiled killer who illegally returned to Attica.
So if you were banished for homicide and you snuck back in,
Any citizen who found you could take action. The state had passed sentence, death, or exile. If you defined exile, the state essentially gave permission for citizens to be executioners or arresting officers on the spot.
outsourcing the enforcement. But what about the risk to the citizen? If you kill this returning exile, surely their family might come after you. A blood feud.
The law dealt with that directly. It stated there could be no homicide lawsuits, no dikai phonu, against people who denounce the word is endignoftun, these illegally returned exiles.
Legal immunity.
Crucial. It removed the fear of private reprisal, ensuring the state sentence would actually be carried out. The priority was absolute order, even if it meant authorizing citizens to kill other citizens under specific circumstances.
This feels like it connects to that other fascinating Athenian legal idea, ekthra. Personal enmity, hatred. It wasn't just a motive, it was almost formalized, wasn't it?
It really says something about their views on honor and accountability. If you were prosecuting someone in Athens, telling the jury you already had ekthra against them, that you hated them, that was actually a good move strategically.
Why? Wouldn't that just make you look biased? Like you're out for revenge, not justice.
You'd think so, but in that context, it worked differently. Prosecutors used it to head off accusations of sycophancy.
The idea that you're just bringing a lawsuit to shake someone down for money or for political reasons.
Exactly. By declaring, look, I have a history with this person. They harmed me. They harmed my family. That's why I'm here. You justified your prosecution. Pursuing enmity in court, if you had grounds, was seen as an honorable course of action. It showed a personal, moral reason for seeking public justice.
It kind of fuses private vengeance with public duty. And this gets taken to an extreme by orators like Lysias, especially after the 30 tyrants, right?
Oh, absolutely. Lysias prosecuting Eratosthenes, one of the 30, he weaponized extra. It wasn't just, this man was involved in my brother's death, so I hate him.
He scaled it up.
Massively. He brilliantly conflated his personal ectra with the collective ectra between the 30 tyrants as a group and the entire city of Athens, the democracy they had overthrown.
Turning his personal case into everyone's case. A political crusade.
Precisely. The speech has this very practical aim. Get the jurors on his side, not just as neutral judges, but as fellow haters, allies sharing a state-sanctioned vendetta against a common enemy. Your fight is my fight. Let's convict him together.
That's ruthless. And that ruthlessness shows up again in how Lysias plays with the actual definition of a crime, particularly that term epodophoro.
Right, epodophoroi.
Right.
Traditionally, it just meant caught in the act.
Yeah.
Red-handed.
Yeah.
Very literal.
You catch the thief with the stolen goods.
Exactly. But after the oligarchy fell, there was an amnesty in 403 BC. It was meant to stop endless cycles of revenge by limiting prosecutions for past political acts. Lysias wanted to go after informers, people whose denunciations under the 30 had led to deaths. But these actions happened months, maybe years ago.
So he couldn't possibly argue they were caught literally in the act.
No way. So, to get around the amnesty and secure what he saw as political justice, he had to stretch that definition radically.
How did he argue it?
He argued epodophoroi shouldn't just be about being caught during the act, but about manifest responsibility.
Yeah.
Is the suspect clearly, undeniably, the agent behind the crime, even if time has passed?
So if the informer pointed the finger and then the 30 killed the person, the informer is still caught in the act in a broader sense because they caused it.
That was the argument. And this leads to this really shocking comparison he makes, which just lays bare how pragmatic they could be bending legal terms.
What was the comparison?
He asked the jury, rhetorically, surely you don't think that it's only epodophoroi if someone physically strikes a person down with a club or a dagger.
Wow.
He's directly equating killing someone by informing on them by delation to a regime like the 30 with the physical act of murder using a weapon.
Words as weapons, information as lethal force within a system of terror.
It's a profound, if brutal, legal maneuver. It shows how Athenian justice could twist and reinterpret its own laws, using legal interpretation itself as a tool to maintain the political order they needed, even if it meant overriding the plain meaning of the law. And what's fascinating here, again, is the contrast. When you flip back to Rome, you see that same kind of absolute state power, but it's built differently. Not so much on Athenian ectra or these dramatic legal reinterpretations. It's built on rigorous, almost ruthless adherence to formal legal structures. The forms themselves demanded conformity.
Right. The complexity of Roman law wasn't just for show, it was a tool. It provided predictability, sure, but it also locked people into the state's way of doing things. Let's talk about a cornerstone of that, the stipulatio. The sources call it maybe the most important institution in Roman law.
It's foundational. The stipulatio is basically a verbal contract, super formal. One person asks a precise question, like, do you promise to give me X? And the other replies with a matching precise answer, I promise.
Simple on the surface.
Deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful. It was defined by formality, simplicity, and this key feature, stricti iuris, strictly interpreted.
Meaning only the exact words mattered.
Precisely. Forget intent, forget fairness, forget context. Did you say the magic words? Yes. Then you're bound. No, then you're not. It permeated everything. Property deals, business, loans.
So this rigid formalism wasn't a bug, it was a feature, a control mechanism.
Absolutely. It ensured that economic life, and by extension social stability, rested on these utterly predictable, state-enforced verbal promises. Form over substance, in a way.
But Rome becomes this huge empire, right? Full of non-Romans, foreigners, peregrini. How did this super rigid Roman-centric system adapt to govern them while keeping its core principles intact?
This is where you see the Roman genius for systematic, pragmatic solutions. They used legal fictions, things like analogy or substitution, or pretending something was true for legal purpose.
And how would that work? Give me an example.
Okay, say a foreigner needed to sue someone under a Roman civil law procedure. It was technically only for citizens. The praetor, the legal official, could insert a fiction into the formula for the case. Let's pretend, for this lawsuit, that this foreigner is a Roman citizen.
A little white lie in the legal paperwork?
Essentially. They weren't changing the fundamental law itself, but they were using these clever procedural workarounds to extend the reach of Roman law. It allowed their system to govern diverse peoples across the empire efficiently.
Maintaining central control through flexible formality. Very Roman.
It demonstrates this incredibly sophisticated yet practical approach. Control through system, adapted as needed.
And you see this absolute focus on state survival, on pragmatic control, play out most starkly in moments of crisis, don't you? Like after the disaster at Cannae in 216 BC.
Cannae, just devastating. One of the worst defeats Rome ever suffered. Tens of thousands killed. The returning general, Varro, was widely seen as responsible for the tactical blunder. He should have been toast.
You'd expect public outrage, trials, maybe execution.
But the Senate. The sources say they displayed glorious and imperishable honor. They did the absolute opposite of what you'd expect. They went out to the city gates to meet Varro as he came back.
Met the failed general.
Met him and publicly thanked him.
Thanked him for what?
Thanked him that he had not despaired of the salvation of his country.
That is astonishing. It feels completely backwards. Punish the survivors, reward the guy blamed for the loss.
It's about the res publica, the state, the commonwealth. It was put above everything else, above blame, above satisfying public anger. It was a brilliant piece of political theater, a psychological move aimed inward.
How so?
By backing the returning commander, even the failed one, they instantly restored a sense of unity, confidence between the government and the people. The message was, panic is the enemy. Despair is the only unforgivable sin. We carry on.
Refusing to buckle under the pressure. And this focus on internal order shaped everything they did next, right?
Immediately. They banned public assemblies near the gates, stopping mass grief turning into riots or panic.
And the mourning restrictions.
Draconian, really. Given the losses, almost every family must have lost someone. They limited official mourning to just 30 days.
Why so short? Seems callous.
Necessity. They needed the public religious rites to continue. Those rites often required an atmosphere of stability, even joy. Prolonged, widespread public mourning could disrupt the state's relationship with the gods, which they saw as vital.
So private grief was subordinated to public religious duty. And what about the soldiers who actually survived Cannae, often seen as cowards for not dying there?
They were dealt with too. They were formed into new legions, yes, but they had to serve in disgrace. Sent off to Sicily, not allowed back in Italy for years.
So forgive the general to keep the state stable, but punish the surviving troops collectively for the failure.
It's that balance again. Roman discipline, even when making political calculations, was always there. Individual survival, individual blame, all secondary to the state's need for order, continuity, and the perception of strength.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating for me. Because underpinning all of this Roman law, Greek military expectations, is this absolute baseline assumption. The individual will sacrifice for the collective good, always. What did the thinkers, the philosophers, the jurists actually say about that bargain?
Well, Cicero tackles this head on. He talks a lot about justice, public duty, and he makes this really strong link between trustworthiness fides and what he calls magnanimity, or greatness of spirit.
So being a great person means being trustworthy. How does that connect to the state?
For Cicero, they're inseparable. He argues the whole commonwealth, the whole state, depends on citizens actually honoring their word, their agreements, keeping their promises. And part of that promise, implicitly, is obeying the laws you live under.
The social contract, basically.
In a sense. And fulfilling that contract requires constant vigilance and specific sacrifices. He says explicitly, a commonwealth relies on citizens making sacrifices that are necessary for the long-term public good, but bad for a citizen's immediate private good.
That's the tension right there. The collective versus the individual, long-term versus short-term.
And the citizen has to choose the collective, the long-term. That's the expectation. Cicero is very harsh on people who break this trust. He warns against those who, quote, harm some so that they might be liberal toward others.
What does he mean by that? Taking from one group to give to another?
Sort of. Or maybe making popular promises, being generous in ways that benefit some people, or your own faction, but ultimately weaken the state's finances or moral fabric. He says doing that is the same kind of injustice as just stealing someone's property.
So private interest, even if it looks like generosity, can't undermine the collective structure. The state's integrity comes first.
Always. That Roman focus on practical need, on legal fights, It finds an echo in the Athenian ideal, too, though they framed it more in terms of pure honor, maybe character. You see this in Demosthenes.
Right, Demosthenes talking about the Athenian way. He says Athens historically had never chosen inglorious safety over the perils of a noble cause. That wasn't just boasting, was it? It was a core part of their identity.
It defined their moral calculus. They consistently rejected the easy path, the pragmatic path sometimes. They refused to just give up leadership, become a junior partner to a stronger power like Thebes or Sparta or even Persia, even when they were offered good terms, safety, security.
They could have had peace, maybe prosperity, just by stepping back. But they chose risk, conflict, often leading to disaster for themselves. Why?
Because, according to Demosthenes, surrender, taking the safe but inglorious option, it would have been morally repugnant and out of character.
Their identity as leaders, as champions of freedom, was worth more than safety.
It seems so. The city's collective honor, its reputation, was an asset they wouldn't compromise, no matter the cost in individual lives or treasure. The state's abstract honor trumped the citizens' concrete survival.
So let's try and bring this all together. We've looked at Roman Imperium, their formal law, Athenian vengeance through ecthra, their ideas of noble sacrifice, and the sources, diverse as they are, they seem to point to one core truth, don't they?
I think so. Ancient state discipline, whether it's Roman or Greek, it's built on this foundation. The
Yeah.
individual subordinate, utterly subordinate to what the state perceives as the needs of the collective.
And the success, the sheer power of these ancient societies, Sparta's discipline, Rome's legal machine and legions, Athens' democratic ideals, it stemmed from that demand for sacrifice.
The demand backed up by systems of law that were either incredibly strict, like Roman stipulatio or is vitae annecies, or ruthlessly flexible when needed, like Lysias twisting the meaning of ep adaphore.
We saw the internal logic. The Senate after Cannae choosing stability over blame.
The Spartans enduring that hellish chaos at Pylos until defeat was undeniable.
The Athenians equating informing with murder to achieve political justice.
It all serves the collective, the state.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe a provocative one, because these societies, for all their ruthlessness, also produced incredible critical thinkers. Socrates, right? Pushing people to question everything. Virtue, justice, the good life, the ultimate individual quest for understanding.
But, and it's a big but, the moment that questioning, or any individual action, looked like it might threaten the system, the army's effectiveness, the state's finances, the legal order.
The state's reaction was immediate and final. No debate.
Exactly. So here's the question for you listening. We have Socrates telling his student Euthydemus that people who don't know the noble things and the good things and the just things are basically slavish. True freedom comes from knowing the good.
Okay.
So if true liberty is this deep understanding, how does our modern focus on individual liberty, often meaning the freedom to pursue private good, maybe without that deeper Socratic examination, how does that square with the kind of absolute collective strength, that unwavering discipline that made these ancient states superpowers? Does our focus on the individual potentially compromise that collective strength?
That's definitely something to chew on. What's the balance between individual freedom and collective power? A question as relevant today as it was then. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.